Welcome back, team. Team, in this particular session, we'll discuss more on the deployment models. Okay. Yesterday, in the previous class, we understand the differences between the on-premises and the cloud environment. And especially coming to the cloud environments, we should understand what are all the different types of cloud environments in the market. We should understand that. To understand these things, we'll spend the next 30 minutes to understand more on these particular deployment models and also service models as well, if time permits. Right, team. So firstly, usually we're very frequently hearing outside as Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, Alibaba, IBM Cloud, right? These are the clouds which we are frequently hearing from outside market, right? And also, if you consider the trend, today's trend, most of the organizations are moving to the cloud environments completely. The first reason, if anyone asks you, the first reason why we are moving to the cloud environment, why organizations are moving to the cloud environment, you can think one thing in your mind always. It's a scalable environment and highly available. Disaster recoveries are completely possible. Provisioning and security is ultimate. You can have these points in your mind. Why we need to move to the cloud environments? You can say all these things. Of course, we can implement all these things by using our on-premises infrastructure also. But you know the problem already. That's what exactly we discussed yesterday. Not so easy to implement all these things. And we understand really well what's the problem, what are all the problems with the on-premises and why we need to move to the cloud environment. Now, to continue the same part, now we are going to understand, we start with the public cloud and what exactly the public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. So these are all the terminologies as a Devops engineer or cloud infra engineer always will come across. So we should understand what all these clouds are. So when you go for this particularly, the first cloud is the public cloud. So just take an example. I gave the example already yesterday. It's a simple example. You can take a public transportation, a bus. You can consider that one as a public cloud. An example, it's a simple analogy. If you consider the public cloud, so what exactly the public cloud means? There are few vendors which can offer you the public cloud. We will call them as cloud vendors, team. We'll call them as cloud vendors. In the terminology, cloud vendors. Those are Azure, AWS, GCP are the common ones where the people will use, are the common ones. And each cloud provider has its own market. I don't want to compare Azure, AWS or GCP. I don't want to make any comparison. For me, all are same. Because if you learn one cloud, you can lead other clouds also. That doesn't matter for you. You don't need to say it outside as you are an expert in Azure. No need actually. Because if you learn one cloud, if you spend 2-3 days on other clouds, obviously you'll be an expert. Because the concepts are same. The terminology will be a bit different. That's the only difference, team. Don't spend any money, especially when you want to learn other cloud environments. Don't do that, team. Not required. One cloud is more than enough. I'm telling you upfront, okay? Don't waste your money. Right. When you come to the public cloud, team, so I told you already, there are cloud providers, Azure, AWS, and GCP. And you can consider, yesterday we started with an example, right? Where our DevOps engineer Vishnu want to migrate or want to deploy an application connecting to the database to the cloud environment. The simplest one is the public cloud. There is no restrictions. Straight away, he can go to the public cloud by taking a subscription as pay-as-you-go model. You know already what is a pay-as-you-go model, right? What are the services you are using? How long you are particularly using those services? For those services, only you will pay at the end of the month. You don't need to pay anything extra to that. And also, there are few techniques in optimizing the cost also. That is also nowadays, I think most of the organizations are moving towards cost optimization, how to optimize the cost. Especially, usually they will think about removing the resources. Removing resources means removing the employees only. And not only that one. You can save a lot of cost, especially when you go for the cloud environments. Then, if you're really having some techniques, you can save cost like anything. I just want to give an example here since the context came. In one of our application, monthly, a year before, exactly, we were paying almost 60K US dollar per month. That was exactly the bill we used to pay for that particular application subscription. But that application is not generating revenue like that. The revenue of that particular application is only 50% of the bill. It is just giving us some 30K US dollar only. It is not giving more than that monthly. That's where the management identified it is not even moving or running towards that particular bill. Forget about the profits. At least we are unable to get whatever we are spending over there. So that is why they just pass the instructions to the infra team, cloud infra team. Hey, can we please proceed for the cost optimization on this particular application subscription? That's where we started our journey a year before in one of our application. Today the cost of that particular application subscription is coming around 15,000 US dollar, 15K. It's coming around. It was 60K the last year, January, February it got started with. But it was not happened just like that, team. The 60K to 15K, it's not happened just in 1 or 2 months. It took almost for us 8 to 9 months to just reduce that bill from 60K to 15K. So for that, we need to use some techniques. Not only this cloud, in any cloud, those are all the common techniques only. If you act in for those techniques, obviously you can reduce the cost to an extent. At the same time, there is a condition, right? You should not impact your daily business. You should not impact that. So your business should go as BAU only. You should not impact that. But at the same time, you need to reduce the cost. So that's like exactly the condition we started. And really we played well and we reduced the cost to the 15K US dollar. With that, we really helped the team or application. We just passed the instructions, not an instruction. We requested the management also. Don't remove any resources specifically in that particular application who are working from the vendor side. Because see, removing a resource is a simple thing. But I think it impacts a lot, right? Obviously, in his daily expenses, whatever it is. Usually he has some commitments. He or she has some commitments. So that is exactly the request we also place. And instead of removing the resources, we saved the same in the infrastructure. So that is exactly the thing we just converted in. All right. But those techniques you should understand. You should understand those techniques. If you understand those techniques, that is also easy for you to just to discuss something in your meetings with your management. You can talk, you can do all these things. You can just present to the management. We can do all these things. If we do all these things, we can achieve to this percentage of this cost savings. You can tell all these things, team. Right? It will be very good add-on, trust me. All right. Okay, apart from just forget about that, I think that's a different context. So this one is a public cloud. So meaning that organizations very commonly will move to the Azure or AWS or the GCP. Why we are going to the cloud environments, team? You know the technique already. The only reason over there is scalability, high availability, disaster recovery, security, no need to manage, no teams are required, everything managed by them. That's a simple thing, right? You don't need to keep any overhead on you. Right? That is exactly the benefit to move to the public cloud. And also you will pay whatever the resources you are using, like bus. For example, if you want to travel from some X to Y, obviously you will pay only for that particular duration, however the conductor is asking you, right? The same way, team. The same way, right? All right, team. Now, let's go to the another cloud, which is a private cloud. What is this private cloud then? So why it is different from the public cloud? We are calling this one as a private cloud? Okay, team. Maybe you trust the cloud. You trust the cloud, Azure, AWS or GCP. Those are public because see, the name itself is very clearly telling it's a public. So some people or some managements or banks will get some panic. Hey, I think we are keeping our sensitive information in the cloud environments for the public. Is it really good? Is it really good? Is it really safe? These kind of doubts usually the organizations will get. To sort out that, of course, there is one way which is a private cloud. But this particular private cloud is again, this private cloud is also managed by vendor only. It's also managed by vendor only. But what exactly the thing? So whenever organizations think really about, I don't want to keep any kind of sensitive information or anything over there on the public clouds. Oh, then obviously you can think about private clouds. But why cloud? Then in that case you can go for the on-premises, no? Why we need to go for the private cloud then? Then what about scalability? Who will give the scalability? Again, who will give the scalability? Who will give the HA? Who will give the DR? Who will give the security? That is why we need a cloud environment again here. That is the reason exactly to have some sort of security where they are unable to trust the public cloud environments. The option for them is a private cloud. Private cloud. And that too, point you need to remember here, it is not like a public cloud. It cannot scale whatever the demand is coming for you. Again, this is also kind of an infrastructure where you need to buy upfront. Some infrastructure you need to buy, but you don't need to manage anything, team. That's the point, difference between the on-premises and the private cloud. But on-premises, you need to manage everything. But private cloud, you don't need to manage everything. Again, vendor will manage that. But scalability to certain extent, not to the max. You cannot go beyond. If you want to go beyond, again, you need to buy the infrastructure first. That's where the private comes into the picture. Okay. That is about the private cloud team. Okay. Then what is hybrid cloud? There is one more cloud called hybrid cloud where they're talking about, what is the drawback exactly you got in the private cloud? The drawback with the private cloud is, of course, you're safely keeping your data in the private cloud, which is owned by you but managed by vendor. You have terms and conditions. Obviously, with the terms and conditions, the vendor will not go beyond those terms and conditions. So your data is safe. You don't need to worry. But the problem with the private cloud is you are unable to scale. You cannot scale to the max. That is not possible. For example, you have an infrastructure you can scale up to some 250 users concurrency. You can scale infrastructure. But all of a sudden, if you get 1000 user concurrency, what you should do? You don't have the infrastructure, right? Obviously, you need to buy the infrastructure again for the private clouds also. So that is the problem again with the private cloud. To overcome that, we are going for the hybrid cloud. Now, if you go for the hybrid cloud team, the name itself is very clearly telling you hybrid, meaning that it's a mixed one, right? The private and public. It's a private and public. You can understand from the name itself. Then what is the advantage we are getting here? Sorry, Tim. What is the advantage we are getting? So you can sense very clearly. See, what is the problem for this organization? The problem for the organization is they want to keep their data very safe, right? Under security. That is exactly the thing they use. Okay, of course, they can use the private cloud. This is a private cloud team. This is a private cloud. They can deploy their database, whatever the database, the data, especially into the private cloud. That is absolutely fine. But whatever the components are really required to scale, really required to have HA, really required to have the DR, those components you can deploy in the public cloud. So that I can get the security with the private cloud. At the same time, my scalability will be really good when it comes to the public cloud environment. So that is the benefit exactly they will get if they go for the hybrid cloud team. If they go for the hybrid cloud, that is the exact advantage. Okay. Then what about the multi-cloud? Why we need to understand about multi-cloud? You may think one thing, team. If you go for the hybrid cloud, the name itself is suggesting you very clearly, it's a combination, public and private. But when you go for the multi-cloud team, the name itself is telling us very clearly multiple clouds, multiple cloud environments. What exactly those things? Those could be Azure, AWS, GCP, or Azure plus AWS, or AWS plus GCP, or GCP plus Alibaba, can be anything, multiple cloud. Now I'm asking a question. Hey, why customer will go for multiple environments? What is the reason behind? Do you think the customer is really rich? That's why they are going? Maybe that could be one reason. But there are few reasons, very strong reasons behind. You know what are those? For example, team, let's take one example. A customer is there, an organization is there where they have their user base in Singapore. They have user base in Singapore. They have an application, that application has a user base in Singapore. Okay. At the same time, they have user base in Hong Kong also. Okay. They have user base in Hong Kong also. Now the point is, team, if you go to the Singapore one, okay, Singapore one, okay, AWS has the data centers where they have the infrastructure. They are offering the infrastructure very clearly in the Singapore region. Let's consider that. But Azure is not offering. Azure is not offering. Azure don't have the data centers in Singapore. Just assume Azure and AWS, GCP, three cloud providers have the data centers in Singapore. I'm just taking an example, team. Okay, maybe use case. Let's assume Singapore. In Singapore, Azure don't have the data centers, but AWS has the data centers. Okay, fine. In Hong Kong, Azure has the data center, but AWS don't have the data center. Let's take this condition. Because all the regions cannot be covered by one cloud. That is not possible. Maybe few clouds, data centers are there in multiple regions, but few may not. So, but to solve the organization has HK user base and Singapore user base also. When you have such a situation, obviously the organization will clearly tell you, okay, then we will go for AWS in Singapore, Azure in Hong Kong. Oh, that is one reason. That is lack of data centers is one reason. There could be one more reason also. Organization may not trust AWS fully. They may not trust AWS fully. Meaning that they have user base in Singapore and Hong Kong. Okay, that's fine. But they want to keep AWS infrastructure in Singapore, but Azure infrastructure in Hong Kong. So that all of a sudden, if something happens to the AWS or AWS goes for a bankrupt, whatever the case, all of a sudden, that should not impact the customer business, right? That is why to have such a high availability, usually customers will go for other cloud providers in other regions also. That is also one reason. Those are the possible cases, especially when it comes to the multi-cloud. All right. So this is all about the cloud deployment models, especially the public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. You no need to really worry on the practical part of each and every cloud, but at least you should understand how exactly the public cloud works. If you really interested and want to learn more, you can understand how multi-cloud also works. Thank you for the session. See you in the next part.